What if synchronicities were never the main event, but only the doorway? Imagine that every strange coincidence, every repeating number, every impossible encounter is just the first knock of something far greater, your higher self, a version of you that already sees the bigger picture, trying to break through the noise of everyday life. Tonight, we'll explore how your higher self speaks, why synchronicities matter, and how to finally hear the full message that's been waiting for you. There are moments in life when something happens that feels too precise, too perfectly timed to be brushed off as coincidence. You think of a friend you haven't spoken to in years, and within minutes, they call you. You open a book at random, and the very sentence staring back at you feels like it was written for you. Right here, right now. These are the moments that stop us in our tracks, stirring a deep question inside. What is really happening here? Most people call them synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, little winks from the universe. But what if these so-called coincidences were not just random sparks of chance, nor distant cosmic tricks? What if they were something far more intimate? Imagine them as whispers from the most expanded version of yourself, your higher self. Higher self is not a separate entity floating above the clouds. It is not a mystical being that you must chase outside of yourself. It is you, the version of you that already sees the larger map, while your everyday self is still navigating the winding road. If your daily consciousness is the actor on stage, your higher self is the director in the wings, quietly adjusting the lights, moving the scenery, and offering subtle cues so that the play unfolds in harmony. And sometimes the director has to get creative. If the actor is too caught up in the lines, too distracted by the noise, the director must find another way to slip a message across. This is where synchronicities often enter the scene. As the gentle knocks, the breadcrumbs scattered across your path, reminding you that you are not wandering alone. But here's the paradox. Synchronicities are not the message themselves. They are the attention grabbers. They are the knock at the door, not the conversation that follows. The higher self whispers through them. Pay attention. Look deeper. Something important is aligning for you now. Think back to a time when a synchronicity completely shifted your perspective. Was it really the coincidence itself that changed you? Or was it the sudden awareness that life was alive, responsive, somehow in dialogue with you? That realization, the awakening of awareness, is the real message. It is your higher self breaking through the walls of everyday thought, reminding you that you are part of a much larger intelligence. The first chapter of this journey is not about learning to chase synchronicities, but about learning to recognize them as a doorway. They are the opening crack in the shell of ordinary perception. And once that crack appears, something greater can flow through. A sense of guidance, a nudge toward alignment, a reminder that you are connected to a version of yourself that already knows the way. The whisper of the higher self is not loud. It doesn't scream or demand. It is subtle, like a feather brushing against your skin, like the pause between two breaths. That is why it so often uses synchronicities to catch your eye, because in the middle of your routine, you might not hear a whisper. But you will notice when the impossible suddenly aligns. So as we begin, I invite you to hold this thought. Every synchronicity in your life may not be a random sign from the universe, but a carefully placed spark, an invitation from your higher self. Not to get lost in the puzzle of signs, but to step into the conversation waiting beyond them. And here's the question for you. Are you willing to listen, not just to the coincidences, but to the deeper voice that placed them there? If this resonates, take a breath and write one word in the comments. The first word that comes to you when you think of your higher self. It may surprise you. The phrase higher self often stirs mixed reactions. Some imagine it as a mystical being floating somewhere above the clouds. Others dismiss it as New Age fantasy, and some feel it as an elusive presence they can't quite explain. But the truth is far simpler, and at the same time, far more extraordinary. The higher self is not separate from you. It is not out there, waiting to be found in a distant temple or hidden in secret teachings. It is you, but you, expanded. You, unbound by the limits of fear, memory, or narrow perspective. Imagine standing at the base of a mountain, only able to see the next few steps on the trail. That is your everyday self, navigating moment by moment. Now imagine being at the summit, where the entire path, the valleys, the turns, the hidden shortcuts, all come into view. That is your higher self, the same being, just holding a broader perspective. Another way to picture it is like using a GPS. When you're behind the wheel, you only see the stretch of road in front of you. But the GPS already knows where the traffic jam is 5 miles ahead, or which side street will save you 10 minutes. Your higher self functions in much the same way. It can see the bigger map of your life, beyond the narrow moment you're in right now. This expanded self is not limited by time the way your everyday mind is. It holds access to multiple timelines, to potentials you have not yet lived, to wisdom that feels ancient and yet intimate. It is as if your higher self is already living in the future version of you, the one who has walked through challenges, discovered lessons, and found a greater sense of peace. And from that place, it calls back to you, guiding you forward. When synchronicities appear, they are one of the higher self's simplest tools, attention grabbers that remind you, look, there is more at play than you realize. But those little nudges are only the beginning. The higher self also communicates through intuition, through dreams, through sudden clarity in moments of stillness. It's the quiet voice that says, don't take that road today, or call that person now. How many times have you felt that whisper and later realized it saved you or led you exactly where you needed to be? The challenge is that we often drown out this voice. Daily life is noisy. Our minds are crowded with worries, plans, and endless scrolling. The higher self does not compete with that noise. It will not shout over the chaos. Instead, it waits for moments when we pause, when we soften, when our attention cracks open, and that is when it slips through. Synchronicities, déjà vu, goosebumps, dreams that linger, all of these are reminders that the director behind the curtain is still guiding the play. To know your higher self, you don't need to escape this world. You only need to recognize that you are more than the narrow role you play each day. You are both the actor and the director, both the one walking the road and the one who sees the entire map. Here's a question worth carrying with you. If your higher self already knows the larger story, how would your life change if you began to trust its whispers more than your fears? Gentle CTA, if that question sparks something in you, leave a simple yes in the comments. Not as an answer to me, but as a declaration to yourself, a small step toward listening more deeply to the voice within. Imagine your higher self as a vast intelligence, patiently guiding you from behind the scenes. It has 1,000 ways to reach you, yet often it chooses the most poetic, the most impossible to ignore path, synchronicities. These are not random fireworks in the sky. They are signals, like the vibration of a phone you had forgotten was in your pocket. Synchronicities are the cracks in the illusion of randomness. They remind you that the fabric of reality is not as linear or mechanical as it appears. Think of them as breadcrumbs, carefully dropped along your path, pulling your attention back to alignment. Why breadcrumbs? Because they don't tell the whole story. They don't give you the final destination. They are designed only to awaken you, to keep you moving, aware that something larger is unfolding. The higher self uses synchronicities, the way a mentor might clear their throat in the corner of the room. A subtle cue that says, pay attention. There's something here for you. It might be repeating numbers flashing everywhere you look. It might be a stranger saying the exact words you needed to hear. It might be two impossible events colliding at the perfect moment. Now, here's the key. The synchronicity itself is never the full message. It is the doorway. The danger is that many people either dismiss it as pure chance or become so obsessed with collecting signs that they miss the deeper conversation. The higher self is not trying to dazzle you with coincidences. It is trying to shift your awareness into a state of listening. Think of a lighthouse flashing across a dark sea. The beam of light doesn't tell the sailor every detail of the coastline. It doesn't reveal every wave, every hidden rock. What it does is orient the sailor. This is the direction. This is where to look. Synchronicities work the same way. They orient your attention toward a point of alignment without spelling everything out. There's also a reason why synchronicities feel charged with emotion. When you encounter one, you often feel a rush, goosebumps, wonder, a strange mix of calm and excitement. That emotional charge is not accidental. It is how your nervous system registers resonance with the higher self. It's a biological confirmation that something meaningful is at play. So how can you begin to work with these signs without falling into confusion? One simple practice is to pause whenever a synchronicity appears. Instead of rushing to decode it, simply ask, what is my higher self drawing my attention to right now? The answer may not arrive instantly, but by asking, you open a channel. You shift from chasing signs to engaging in dialogue. Here's something you can try right now. Think of the last synchronicity you experienced. Maybe it was a repeating number, a song that came at the perfect time, or an encounter that felt impossible. Close your eyes for a moment and ask yourself, if this was my higher self knocking, what was it trying to highlight for me? Don't overthink it. Allow the first whisper of insight to surface. That is the conversation beginning. When you start to view synchronicities as a language of your higher self, instead of random accidents or puzzles to obsess over, everything changes. Life itself becomes more interactive. Every moment carries the potential of a message. You move from being a passive observer of coincidences to being an active participant in a dialogue with your own expanded self. And maybe that's the real gift. Not the synchronicities themselves, but the shift they provoke. The awakening of a deeper relationship with the part of you that already sees the full map. If you've ever felt that rush of meaning when a synchronicity appeared, type the word aligned in the comments. Let's see how many of us have felt the higher self whisper through these moments. If synchronicities are the gentle knocks on the door, then dreams, intuition, déjà vu, and sudden insights are the conversations that follow once you step inside. The higher self is endlessly creative, and synchronicities are only one of its languages. When you begin to listen more deeply, you'll discover that your expanded self has been speaking to you in many ways all along. One of the most powerful channels is the realm of dreams. At night, when the conscious mind finally relaxes its grip, the higher self has a chance to weave messages into symbolic stories. Have you ever woken from a dream so vivid it stayed with you all day, carrying a feeling you couldn't shake? That lingering resonance is not random. It is your higher self using imagery and metaphor to bypass the logical mind. The dream doesn't always give you literal instructions. It often speaks in symbols, like a poem written in the language of your subconscious. Another channel is intuition, that quiet knowing that arises without reason or evidence. Logic demands proof, but intuition arrives fully formed, like a flash of recognition. You just know. And later, when you look back, you often realize that intuition was right. Why? Because the higher self is not guessing. It already sees the wider map. It nudges you toward alignment. Even when your rational mind can't see the path yet. Then there's déjà vu, that eerie feeling of having lived a moment before. Many dismiss it as a glitch in the brain, but what if it's actually a glimpse of your higher self, reminding you that time is not as linear as it seems? That brief familiarity could be your expanded self, showing you that you're on a path you've already touched in another potential timeline. It's like a wink from outside time, reassuring you, yes, you're exactly where you need to be. And what about those sudden insights that drop in out of nowhere, the solution to a problem? In the shower, the phrase that comes while you're walking, the clarity that appears just before sleep, these are not random sparks of creativity. They are downloads, moments when your higher self slips past the noise and places the answer directly in your awareness. The common thread in all these channels is subtlety. The higher self never forces itself upon you. It does not shout over the chaos of the world. It speaks in whispers, nudges, impressions, and moments that feel alive with meaning. And because the language is subtle, it requires a shift in the way you live. You must learn to value silence as much as sound, pauses as much as movement, inner resonance as much as external evidence. Here's the key. The more you acknowledge these channels, the more they open. When you record your dreams, your higher self will speak louder through them. When you trust your intuition, it will grow sharper. When you pause after déjà vu and simply ask, what am I being reminded of right now? The answer may rise to the surface. Communication deepens through attention. So instead of waiting passively for a synchronicity to appear, you can begin living in a state of active listening. Dreams, intuition, déjà vu, insights. These are not interruptions of normal life. They are the hidden operating system always running in the background. Your higher self is never silent. It is only that most of us have forgotten how to listen. And maybe the greatest realization is this. You are not trying to summon your higher self. You are remembering that you already are it. Every whisper is not an outside message, but a reminder of the part of you that has always been guiding from within. If you've ever felt your higher self speak through a dream or intuition, share one word in the comments that captures how it felt. Let's gather the languages of the self together. When people first begin to notice the whispers of the higher self, the synchronicities, the dreams, the flashes of intuition, two traps often appear. Both can pull us away from the true purpose of this guidance. The first trap is ignoring everything, dismissing it all as coincidence, imagination, or fantasy. The second is the opposite, seeing signs everywhere, interpreting every leaf that falls or every random word on a billboard as a coded message. Both extremes cloud the real. Dialogue with your higher self. Let's start with the first trap, dismissal. Modern culture trains us to value only what can be measured, explained, or repeated in a laboratory. Anything else is brushed off as meaningless chance. So when a synchronicity happens, or when intuition whispers, many people immediately silence. It's just coincidence. I'm imagining things. But what happens when you consistently dismiss the voice of your higher self? Over time, you lose sensitivity to it. The whispers become harder to hear, not because they stopped, but because you stopped listening. Imagine constantly interrupting a wise friend every time they try to speak. Eventually, the friend will grow quiet, waiting until you're ready. Now consider the second trap, overinterpretation. Once someone realizes that synchronicities and inner guidance are real, they can swing to the other extreme. Suddenly, everything feels like a sign. A bird flies past, and it must mean something. A random stranger sneezes, and it must be a message. This creates obsession, even anxiety. Instead of feeling supported by the higher self, you end up feeling trapped in a maze of possible meanings, desperate to decode every detail of life. But here's the truth. Your higher self is not playing a game of riddles. It's not trying to overwhelm you with an endless stream of cryptic symbols. The purpose of these communications is not to make you paranoid or dependent. It is to align you with clarity, peace, and expansion. Real guidance has a very different quality. It carries a calm resonance, a feeling of rightness that doesn't come with frantic overthinking dot. So how can you navigate between these two traps? The key is discernment. Discernment means paying attention not only to the event, but to the feeling it carries. Does the synchronicity come with a sense of resonance, a quiet certainty, even a spark of wonder? Or does it create confusion, tension, or fear as you scramble to interpret it? The higher self's messages always lean toward clarity. They may be subtle, but they never come wrapped in panic. One practical way to stay balanced is to create a simple filter. Is this sign drawing me closer to peace or deeper into confusion? If it leads to peace, pay attention. If it fuels only obsession, take a breath, step back, and let it go. Not every ripple, in reality, is a directive. Some are simply ripples. The higher self doesn't need you to decode everything. It only needs you to notice when something truly resonates. Think of it like learning a new language. At first, you might mishear words or overinterpret random sounds as meaning. But as your fluency grows, you learn which words matter, which tones carry real intent, and which are just background noise. Communicating with the higher self is the same. With time, the dialogue becomes clearer, and the unnecessary static fades away. The real goal is not to collect signs, but to develop trust. Trust that your higher self knows how to reach you. Trust that you don't have to force meaning onto everything. Trust that when something is truly important, a message will repeat, amplify, and grow clearer until you cannot miss it. If you've ever fallen into one of these traps, ignoring signs or chasing too many, write balance in the comments. Let this be your reminder that the higher self speaks in clarity, not in confusion. If synchronicities are the knocks and dreams are the whispers, then alignment with your higher self is the full conversation. The real purpose of noticing signs is not to collect them, but to shift into a way of living where you are constantly attuned to the guidance already flowing through you. Alignment is not about waiting for rare miracles. It is about making every moment part of an ongoing dialogue. So what does it mean to live in alignment with your higher self? It means learning to act from the expanded perspective rather than from fear or habit. It means choosing not from the small self that only sees the next step, but from the larger self that already holds the whole map. When you live in this alignment, life feels less like random trial and error, and more like a dance, a rhythm between your daily choices and the subtle cues from your expanded awareness. One of the simplest practices is journaling your signs. When you write down synchronicities, intuitive nudges, or powerful dreams, you train your awareness to notice the threads connecting them. Over time, patterns emerge. The higher self doesn't just send isolated whispers. It weaves a narrative. And by journaling, you begin to see the story unfold. Another practice is intentional questioning. Before sleep or in meditation, ask your higher self a simple, heartfelt question. Not a demand, but a request for guidance. Then release it. You may find the answer arriving in a dream, in a synchronicity, or in a sudden insight days later. The act of asking opens the channel. The act of releasing allows the answer to come without forcing it. Meditation also plays a profound role. When you create stillness, you quiet the noise that normally drowns out the whispers. In silence, the voice of the higher self becomes clearer. You may not hear words, but you will feel alignment, a sense of expansion, a clarity of direction, a peace that carries its own authority. But perhaps the most important shift is trust. Alignment does not mean decoding every detail of life. It means trusting that your higher self knows how to reach you. If a sign is important, it will repeat. If an intuition matters, it will return. Your job is not to chase, but to listen. And then to act. This brings us to the key: action. Guidance without action fades. Imagine receiving directions from a GPS and then refusing to move. The map becomes useless. In the same way, the higher self offers nudges, but it is your willingness to take the step that completes the loop. Alignment is not passive. It is a dance between listening and moving, receiving and responding. Living in alignment also transforms how you see challenges. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is my higher self showing me through this?" Every obstacle becomes a lesson, every delay a redirection, every ending a doorway. Life stops being a series of random struggles and becomes an unfolding curriculum designed by the part of you that already sees the larger arc. And here's the beauty. Alignment does not require perfection. You don't need to interpret every sign correctly or meditate flawlessly. You only need to keep opening, keep listening, keep trusting. A dialogue with your higher self is not fragile. It is patient, persistent, and deeply loving. Even when you ignore it, it waits. Even when you resist it, it whispers again. So perhaps the real invitation is not to chase the extraordinary, but to bring the extraordinary into the ordinary. 2. Let the higher self be part of your daily walk, your conversations, your decisions, your quiet moments. To live not in separation from it, but in constant dialogue. And maybe, when you look back years from now, you will see that every synchronicity, every dream, every intuitive nudge was never about random chance. They were always the breadcrumbs leading you home to the self you've been all along. If you're ready to step into that alignment, type "ready" in the comments. Let it be your declaration, not to me, but to your own higher self, that you are listening now.